Hello everybody and welcome to part 2 of passing data. Today we are going to demonstrate how to pass data through TableViews. How we are going to set this up is we're going to display food trucks in certain cities and then also the menu items that those food trucks carry. So I pre-populated this project which can be found on GitHub, and it will have a city struct, which will have the name of the city. It'll have an array of food trucks, and so we have the food truck struct as well. And the food truck will have a food truck name, and it will also have a menu. And so if we click on menu, we can see that menu is just contains an array of food items, which is just an array of strings. So we'll start off with the storyboard and we will set up our table view controller. So what we're going to do first is display the cities. And then if you click on a city, it'll show the food trucks in those cities. If you click on the food truck, then it will display all the menu items available at that food truck. So we are going to start off by just deleting this. And we're going to grab ourselves a table view controller. Let's make sure our navigation controller is embedded into that. And then we're going to take the second view controller. So this one's going to be for the food trucks. And a third table view controller, which will be for the menu items. So how do we get from here to here to here? Well, we're going to do that through segues. So let's just drag, click, make sure you click on the cell. We're going to drag from the cell over to the second table view controller, hit show. And then we're going to do the same thing for the food truck table view controller over to the menu table view controller. Perfect. Let's expand this a little bit. Cool. All right. So we need, let's make this the initial view controller. That way we know the entry point of our app. And what do we need now? Well, we need to create classes for each one of these table view controllers. Let's do that. So let's come up here, new file, CocoaTouch class, UITableView controller, and we will name this city TVC for table view controller. Next. All right. So we have the first one. Let's create another one for our food truck table view controller. And finally, a third one for our menu table view controller. All right, so now we have all three. So let's assign them to all of our controllers that we created in our storyboard. So first things first, let's come over to here and click on this first one, and this will be the city table view controller. This one will be the food truck table view controller, and this one will be for the menu items. Awesome. So let's go into our first one, and let's take a look at what this provides us. So let's just delete some of these comments out. All right. So there are two main methods for table view controllers that have to be implemented. Number one is number of rows in section, which is just the number of rows in each section of the table view controller. So we are only going to have one section, which is, and we're actually going to remove this here. One section is the default. And so how many rows do we want in it? So this, since this is our city table view controller, the number of rows is just going to be equal to the amount of cities that we have. And I created some fake data just to save us some time in here. So we're actually going to copy and paste this. We'll just put this right here. So what does this do? This is going to supply the data for all of our food trucks. So we have food trucks that are located in Detroit, food trucks in New York, and San Diego. And then we have our cities. So this is the information for Detroit. And you can see we have 3 different types of menus for 3 different types of food trucks. And it's the same for New York, San Diego. And then we have all of our cities, and each city will contain the city name and then all of our food trucks. And then we're just going to return an array of city items, which will be our 3 cities. And then we'll use these 3 cities for our city table view controller that we're on right now. So first things first, let's call this, and actually, well, we need to make an array, right? So we need to supply our table view with a data source. So let's come up here and let's make a data source for that. So our data source is going to be an array of city items. So let's just name it cities. It's equal to city. Okay. And then we will say cities is equal to load data. Because load data is going to return us these 3 cities. And the best way to do this is just to say, how many rows do we want in our table view? Well, we just want however many cities that we will have to display. So we will do cities.count, which is just going to take the number of cities that we have, and that's what we'll use. The second method here, which is cell for row index path, this is where we will create our reusable cell and also assign the cell's label. We will assign a city to our cell's label. So it gives us right off the bat here, let cell equal to TableView.DQ reusable cell with identifier. So what these identifiers are is we give an identifier to the cell that's in storyboard, and it uses that identifier to know which cell to reuse, because the way TableViews work is it reuses all of the cells that it has on its table. So right now we have it just gives us this default reuse identifier. We're going to change that. Let's just make a constant up here and just say let, let's call this city cell identifier equal to city cell. All right. And then we will replace it with this city cell identifier. Awesome. Let's come to copy this. Now we need to go to our storyboard and make sure that this cell has that reusable identifier. So if you click on the cell, come over to here, and you can see that it has a space for identifier, which is currently blank. So let's put in our identifier. Okay, so now we need to set the cell's text label with our city name. So how are we going to do that? Well, we need to access each city that is in our array and then use that city's name property to do that. So in order to get access to the city, we are going to do let city equal to cities index path dot row. All right, so what does this mean? Well, TableView has index paths, which represent the row and the section of a TableView cell. And so in order to get each city that belongs at that row, we access each city in our cities array by its index. And since a table view has indexes, we can just pass in the row property of the index path as the index of our city array. So that's where we do that. And then since we have each city now, we will access the cell's text property. And use our city name to set that. So we get each city, and then we use that to set these cells text label. So let's run it and see what we have. And there we go. We have each city in our table view controller. And let's just clean this up really quick. We actually do not need any more of these table view methods. And we will be using this, which is our prepare for segue method, which we will use to pass our city's food trucks property over to the next view controller. Okay, now that we have our city table view controller set up, the rest of this is pretty simple because it's following very similar steps. So let's make this so that when we click on the city, it will go to the next table view controller, which is the food truck table view controller, and it will display all the food trucks located in that city. So let's come over to food truck table view controller, and we will need an array of food trucks, similar to how we needed an array of cities in the city table view controller. And what will happen is when we click on the city in our first table view, it will access the food trucks located at that city and then pass it to this second table view controller. And we will be doing that through the prepare for segue method. So let's say var food trucks is equal to food truck, and this is just going to be an empty array of food truck items. And let's get rid of, just like in the last one, number of sections, and then so number of rows. Let's do food trucks dot count. Again, we will need this prepare for segue, all this other stuff. Besides the self-road index path, we don't really need, so let's get rid of that, and let's configure our cell. Again, we have this reuse identifier, so let's make another constant for that. and we'll just call this let food truck cell identifier equals to food truck cell. And just like the last time, let's come in the storyboard, and let's make sure that our cell is actually assigned that identifier. Food truck cell. Now, very similar to how we accessed each city in the city table view controller, we are going to do the same for each food truck inside the food truck table view controller. So let's do let food truck is equal to food trucks index path dot row, and assign the cell's text label, text property, our food truck name. Okay, so how do we get this to work? Because it's not going to work currently because we're not passing in anything to this food trucks array from the city table view controller. So right now is just empty, and it will display such. It'll just be 0 food trucks, and there won't be any names for the food trucks. It'll just be blank. So we need to come into here, our city table view controller, and we need to use this prepare for segue method to pass the array of food trucks over to our next table view controller. So in order to populate the food truck array on our food truck table view controller, we're going to need to pass the food trucks over there from the selected city. So we're going to do that in the prepare for segue method. So this is on the city table view controller. And what we need to do is we need to somehow identify which city we actually select when we do select it. And there's a method on a table view that you can access that gives you the index path for the selected row. So we're going to start off there. So let's do let index path equals to self.tableview, which is the table view of our table view controller, dot index path for selected row. All right, this returns an optional. So safely unwrap that, and let's say, and we're going to need to access the row of the index path. So actually we can do this kind of in one shot where we do, let's do a guard statement and do guard let selected row. Let's do selected row equals to index path dot row. Else we're just gonna return safely. And then so we need the selected city that is located at that is, right, because it's an optional, we got to put it there. Put the question mark there. So now that we have our selected row, we need to locate whatever city is at that selected row. So similar to what we did here in the self-row index path, we are going to do here, and we're going to grab that city out of our cities array depending on what row we end up selecting in our table view. So let's do let selected city equal to cities index path dot row. Oh, I'm sorry about that. It is actually selected row because we pulled out, which is an integer, and it's just going to go ahead and access whatever city is at that index that inside the array that we select. So now that we have our selected city, we're going to pass the city's food truck array over to the food truck array that we have located on the food truck table view controller. So we need a reference to our food truck table view controller. So we will say let destination view controller equals to segue dot, so we're accessing the segue here, dot destination as food truck table view controller. Perfect. So now we need to access the food truck array that is located on our food truck table view controller. So we will say destination VC, which is our food truck table view controller, dot food trucks is equal to selected city dot food trucks. So we're going to take whatever food trucks are located inside of our food trucks array for the selected city, and we're going to assign that to the food trucks array that is on our destination view controller, which is our food truck table view controller. So this should work now. Let's give it a go and see what we have so far. Alright, so let's first select Detroit, and we will see the food trucks that are located inside our Detroit food truck array, which is right here. Perfect. Okay, now that we have that working, we are on the last part, which is displaying the menu items at each food truck when we actually select a food truck. So similar to what we did for the city table view controller and the food truck table view controller, we will also be doing for the menu table view controller. So let's come over to the menu table view controller and let's clean this up. We don't need this. We don't need the number of sections because there's just one section. Number of rows in section, we will need that. We will also need our cell for row index path to configure our cell. And actually, all this other stuff we don't need. We don't even need to prepare for segue this time because we're not segueing anywhere from the menu items. That's the last stop. So let's get rid of all that. Okay, now that that is cleaned up, we are going to need an array to populate the number of rows in section, or tell it how many rows we actually need in this table view. So our array is just going to be an array of strings. And as you can recall, the menu struct has a variable called food items, and it's just an array of strings. And that's what we're going to be displaying. So let's come over to here and say var menu items is equal to array of strings. And we're going to say menu items dot count. We're going to say let menu item equal to menu items index path dot row. Let's assign our cells text label property to our menu item. Okay. And we also again have this identifier, so let's make another constant for that, and we'll just call this menu item cell identifier equals to menu item cell. Menu item cell identifier. Come over to our storyboard and make sure that our menu cell actually has an identifier. So come over to the menu table view controller, and let's give it an identifier. So we have our food truck table view controller, and we're going to use the prepare for segue again, and very similar to what we did in the city table view controller, we will also be doing in the food truck table view controller. So actually, let's just copy and paste this so we can actually save some time. Okay, so since we copy and pasted this, we need to adjust it a little bit because our food truck table view controller does not have an array of cities. It has an array of food trucks. And our destination is not the food truck table view controller because that is the view controller that we're currently working on. And we're segueing from to the menu table view controller. And our menu table view controller does not have an array of food trucks. It has an array of menu items, which is an array of strings. And we don't have a selected city. Let's rename this to selected food truck. And let's call this selected food truck dot menu because the food truck has a menu and a menu has an array of food items. So just to quickly go over one last time what's going on here, we are grabbing the selected row from our table view and getting the food truck that is at that selected row. And then we are getting a reference to the destination view controller that we're going to, which is the menu table view controller. And the menu table view controller has an array on it, which is an array of strings, and it's called menu items. And when we select a food truck, we are accessing that food truck's menu, and then we're gonna take the food items array on that menu and assign it to the menu items on our menu table view controller. So that way when we select the food truck and it goes in the menu table view controller, we can populate this and then display all of our food items in our menu table view controller. So let's give it a go and we should be okay. So let's click on San Diego. We have 3 food trucks here. Let's click on this last one, the food stop, and you can see that the menu items for the food stop are loaded hot dog, wedges, panini, and water. Come back, click on suburbs, and we can see the menu items for that. New York. See all the menu items there. Great. Looks like everything's in place. You can contact me for any questions, and the source code will also be on GitHub, and the link should be at the bottom of this video. Thank you very much.